Yeah, welcome back, James. This is part two here of our interview. We've done this a couple of months ago when you guys just launched with RioDeFi. Back then, I was more tapped into the Polkadot ecosystem and Substrate. And then over the past couple of months, we've always stayed in touch. But over the past couple of months, I pivoted my research and my energy and time more towards Cosmos. Nevertheless, I think both ecosystems are one of the most successful ones when it comes to interoperability. And we just talked about this a lot in our pre-conversation. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about exactly this, about connecting blockchains, interoperability models, and also where you guys stand with RioDeFi. Obviously, DeFi is still one of the main narratives and very exciting technology and also financial technology set that impacts a lot of people's lives, and a lot of people generate passive cash flow through trustless contracts. So that's really cool. And that's what you guys are also trying to become, right? A DeFi portal, and also merging it and bridging it together with CeFi. So yeah, we're going to be talking about all this. But first of all, James, thanks for tuning in. How is everything going? How is Hong Kong? How is everything?
It's going really well, Michael, Cryptocito, and pleasure to be here. Hong Kong has actually been doing quite well during this COVID situation. We haven't had really any cases in the past few weeks, I think, actually maybe just one or so. So, thankfully things here, everyone's wearing masks, people, the vaccination rate's pretty good. And so, things are okay. And from that perspective, and then from the crypto perspective, obviously things are going quite well. Obviously, the market's been up significantly over the past few weeks. Recovering from those summer lows, I guess you could say. So been tracking that very closely, and we're seeing a lot of renewed interest in DeFi, obviously NFTs, and the whole market's really heating up in terms of especially the gamified finance. There's a number of projects that come to RioDeFi in terms of we have an incubation hub, and so projects come to us for advice and support and how they can get connected to our chain and to the broader, Polkadot ecosystem, as well as to other blockchains, because we are in the process of building bridges to multiple chains. So thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on here again and speaking with you. And
Yeah, that's awesome. I also like this kind of multi-chain approach that you guys have, and that you see is not just to say, okay, I want to go all in only on Substrate and Polkadot is the future, but also to say, okay, I'm open for other technology stacks, right? And there are different interoperability protocols that you could eventually also connect to and integrate. But yeah, I think today the purpose is also that, because like I said, I was really big on Polkadot and the Parachain auctions and all those kind of things. But over the past couple of months, I have focused my research more on Cosmos, so I'm a bit outdated on that. So we're going to be talking about also your kind of like potential Parachain journey, right? How do you get there? What's the process of even fulfilling the requirements to potentially become a Parachain candidate even, and also the money that's involved there. We have seen now what was it, Akala and the Karura network went live. It won the first slot and first auctions. But before we tap into that, can you give a brief kind of TLDR of from when we talked back then? I think that was the time, literally the day when you guys launched the RField token, and today, I mean, it's been 9 months now, and you guys are actively working and building. So can you give a brief context of what you've done over the past couple of months? Where do we stand, and how everything has evolved?
Yeah, sure. So thank you again for having me on and to share this. So basically, the ecosystem has evolved quite rapidly. During the bull run that we've had over the past year. So our initial scope, obviously, we're building, a substrate-based blockchain, or we have RioChain out there. The mainnet is live, so people can, they can try out Rio Wallet, which is available both on the web version as well as a mobile version for both iOS and Android. We do now have multi-chain support for Rio Wallet. So there's actually the ability to use it for RioChain, but also for Binance Smart Chain, OKX Chain, Ethereum, Bitcoin, Kusama, and Polkadot. So all of those different blockchains can be accessed through the Rio mobile wallet. And then we're rolling out different decentralized applications, or dApps, Right now on Ethereum, you can actually access Uniswap, Aave, Compound, and some other dApps. We have a partnership with Refinable now, which has been announced, which is available on Binance Smart Chain, which is an NFT marketplace. And there's a number of other dApps that will be rolling out in the weeks ahead. Probably some I missed already that we're already connected to. So, our goal with that is to be, multi-chain, as you mentioned, but also to have, this ecosystem of dApps that you can access from one place. Because one of the goals with Rio Wallet has always been to make blockchain much easier to use. And for, a lot of people, myself included, I'm usually bouncing around to like a bunch of different wallets. Like I have my MetaMask for Ethereum and also for Binance Smart Chain, you can use that. But then, sometimes I go to a different wallet, for, I use the polkadotjs.org wallet as well as Rio Wallet for, Polkadot assets. And, there's all these different blockchain wallets you can have, right? So it's nice to have everything in one place. And then also to have access to the dApps on a mobile phone environment. So, that's something that's pretty unique and that we're very excited to have done. As we discussed previously too, we're also working on our exchange. So Rio Exchange has been under many months of development. So we tried a few different paths and now we're in the final stages. We're actually in the midst of getting an audit completed for the Rio Exchange, and then we plan to roll out with synthetic trading at first, so people can have a chance to try out the platform, learn how to trade, make sure they're comfortable with it, because we want to target also non-crypto people to be able to trade crypto for the first time. So we're going to have some trading competitions where people can trade with synthetic assets, so that there's no money at stake. They don't have anything that they have to worry about losing, just so they can get first try of crypto trading. And then after that, we'll roll out with the full crypto trading platform. So yeah, in the midst of launching that before the end of this year. And we also have, as I mentioned, our incubation hub. So we're incubating a number of different projects, which many of them will start on Ethereum, but then we'll move over to Rio Chain, because we'll actually have compatibility for the Ethereum virtual machine with our future upgrade of Rio Chain, which is in the coming 2 months, actually. So then after that, people will be able to move Ethereum-based apps onto Rio Chain, which can serve as a kind of layer 2 option for people. And our goal, of course, is to become a parachain of the Polkadot network. So then people can come from Ethereum onto Rio Chain, have interoperability between those two networks, but then through the Polkadot ecosystem, have interoperability with all those other Polkadot network blockchain projects, all the level 1 layer 1 substrate projects, but then many of them are also building bridges, right? So you have this kind of like web network, right, where if they build bridges to various blockchains, we're building bridges to various blockchains, we can all connect through Polkadot and through Kusama, which those two things are bridged together. It creates this really nice ecosystem where blockchains can interoperate. And obviously Cosmos also has their take on that, which we had talked about a little bit. And I'm a huge fan also of the Cosmos ecosystem. For me, it's not like an either or thing. We happen to be built on Substrate because we like the Rust programming language. We think their approach to interoperability is very good. But Terra blockchain is built on Cosmos, and they're the top. I just checked today; they're the top 16 cryptocurrency by market cap. Obviously, that's quite huge. And what they've built has been pretty amazing. So I'm a big fan of that project and the other projects that they've incubated. So, I've been looking at the Cosmos ecosystem very extensively as well. So, for me, it's all about trying to create this truly interoperable blockchain ecosystem where it's not just, siloed chains only talking to themselves. It's like, let's have Ethereum talk to Bitcoin. Let's have Bitcoin connect somehow to Polkadot, right? And there's ways that's happening with a Polka BTC project that's going to have some sort of synthetic Bitcoin on top of the Polkadot ecosystem. But there's a lot of different approaches to this, and that's why I think for us and anyone else, people say, oh, this bull market, it's been going on for a long time. Yeah, it had a dip, but what's the long term ability for this thing? I mean, we're still super early. These networks aren't even talking to each other yet, and like all the transactions are fully public, and like, it's like as if your bank account was just viewable the entire world. I mean, the privacy elements of blockchain, some blockchains obviously are quite well developed in that aspect, but many are not yet. So there's a lot of things that are yet to come. And so I think we're still very much in the like 1995, maybe now we're in 1996 when it comes to blockchain compared to internet technologies like 96 or 97 versus, um, obviously in the 2000s and whatnot, you have a much different internet, right? So I think we're still on the way to a much different money system.
Awesome, yeah, and that comes from somebody who is a very early crypto adopter. Back then, probably only Bitcoin adopter, I think 2012, 2013. And then I think we've also been one of the early Ethereum investors and proponents. So that's cool to hear your thoughts. And I also like this ideology that you have and that the RioDeFi team pursues, is to have this multi-chain and interoperable future, right? And I think Bitcoin is kind of like this blockchain 1.0 innovation that came up, and then Ethereum expanded with smart contracts to blockchain 2.0. And I think blockchain 3.0 is not much about scalability, it's rather about interoperability. I think it's more about building this connected blockchain economy, because then you have truly you can truly leverage synergies, right? Everybody says, oh, we're going to leverage synergies, but yeah, you're not actually, if you're not connected, if you're not compatible, right? Otherwise it's all isolated silos and you can't communicate. Like you're saying, you end up downloading 25 different wallets they're not compatible, and then you still have to route through centralized exchanges eventually, because those are the guys that just hold your coins and then do the swap for you, but you always have this counterparty risk. I think one of the biggest things that we need to achieve in crypto to get also true mass adoption and true real world utility is building trustless bridges, right? So that we're fully in this decentralized ecosystem and not just partially. But yeah, so that's really cool. And you already said that you chose Substrate because it's easier to build upon. I think back then when you were looking for platforms to build upon, I think Polkadot Substrate was also one of the most that made most sense back then. I think Cosmos was still a little bit under the radar, and I think in early mid 2020 they still had some internal back and forth going on and some conflict. So I think back then Cosmos wasn't even so much in on the map for everyone. But what would be some other benefits that you have now with RioDeFi and the Rio chain to be part of Polkadot? And also, please share maybe we can kick this off with some general thoughts, like what are the requirements to become a parachain on either Polkadot or Kusama? Like what's the process there? Is having built on Substrate already enough, or is there more things that you need to fulfill? Maybe you can share some thoughts about that.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things is obviously you need a blockchain that's compatible with the overall Polkadot ecosystem. So you have to have the chain upgraded to the right specifications. So we're actually in the process of upgrading Rio chain to Substrate version 3 right now to complete that. Because as you know, Parity Technologies, it's a pretty big company and they're constantly doing development. And so with that comes a lot of upgrades and then modifying your chain. So it's as you continue down the path, you're building various things for the different applications, and then the chain version itself is changing, and so then it's like realigning to that ecosystem. So yeah, one of the things is to have the chain in the right specifications. Another is to get connected to the Rococo Parachain testnet. So that's been something we've been working on. But it's not just a straightforward process. There's a little bit of a there's an acceptance process in place. So you have to go through that, and then for the Kusama parachain auctions, yeah, you have to basically have a Kusama version of the chain. So for us, we've been focused on Polkadot, but certainly we plan to have a sister network that will be connected to Rio chain via a bridge that will also be launching for the Kusama ecosystem. And there'll be a benefit, obviously, to our fuel token holders. So they'll get airdrops of this sister chain network token that will connect to Kusama. And then Rio chain itself will be the one connecting to Polkadot. So, yeah, basically there's a crowd loan functionality as a palette, basically, that you can connect. It's a module for the Polkadot ecosystem and for Kusama. So this crowd loan function is what you use to gather the community resources that you stake in order to secure a parachain slot. So basically, you have these various parachain slots ranging from like 6 months to 1 to 2 years, which you can get in these increments. And so you have to have enough community members contributing DOT or KSM, for the respective networks in order to secure that parachain slot. Now, for Kusama, there were over $200 million worth of KSM contributed for the top 5 Kusama parachain slot winners, with the number 1 being Karura, which is the sister network of the Akala network. And so I think that one had over $100 million worth of KSM for their, I believe it was a 2-year parachain slot. So this is quite an expensive process, but obviously people, when they go for these, they anticipate that basically you forgo the staking reward. So for example, both DOT and KSM, if you stake those, you use the nominated proof of stake process, you get rewards for those. And the Polkadot rewards, I think, are around 14% annually right now, depending on which nominator you use. Different ones charge different fees and whatnot, but somewhere around that. So, you can think about, okay, if Kusama was 100 million and Polkadot should be a bigger network, should cost more. So it's going to be at least probably 100 million to get at least maybe the first slot. So, that's $14 million worth of staking rewards that the people who are staking the DOT, or, in the other case, Kusama, that they're foregoing, right, to be able to participate in this. So they're really putting a lot of faith and trust, obviously, in the projects. So, you have to obviously have good development, have a good community, have good, belief, and also have people that are, to some extent, have a lot of DOT and KSM, right, to stake with you and to go with your project. So, there's sort of a phased rollout approach with these parachains. So obviously, with Kusama, they're starting with 5. Then with, they're going to test that out for a while, at least a few weeks, to make sure everything's working well before rolling out for the DOT parachain slot auctions. And then, take all the learnings from Kusama, make sure it's all good, because Kusama is meant to be sort of the canary network, they call it. So it's not a test net, it's a live, economically viable network, but it has a faster governance process than Polkadot, so it's a shorter time frame for governance decisions. I believe it's 7 days versus Polkadot's 28 days. And then obviously the economic threshold is lower in terms of overall market cap. So you have this process. Then you can kind of for them, they get to test things but out in the wild. So they first test things on their test net, which is the West End test net. Then they, from there, make sure it works, roll it out in Kusama. Okay, it's good. If there are any governance changes needed, upgrade that, then roll it out on Polkadot. So it's this kind of phased approach. And then, they're starting out with, I think, 5 as well, parachain slots on Polkadot. But then over the long run, they hope to have, I believe, at least 100 parachain slots for each network. And actually, Kusama has many more validator nodes as well. They have like 1,000 validator node program. And so, they want to have quite a distributed network. So, there's the parachain slots, which give you the ability to send your blockchain data up to that sort of parent network, you could say. So, you send it to, let's say, RioChain's data. We would send the data from each set of blocks up to the Polkadot network to be stored on their ledger. So that's, essentially benefiting from this shared security layer, and giving yourself a redundancy in case, so you don't get economically attacked or anything else. You have this sort of backup of your chain data on a very secure, decentralized network. So that's the benefit of becoming a parachain. And then you can rent that space out to other substrate-based blockchains who can then become para-threads of the parachain. And so this is where,
let me just hook in here before you talk about para-threads, because I think the para-thread is also a very interesting model that is not too much talked about. Everybody only talks about the parachains, but the para-threads could also be very interesting to further kind of dilute the security space on the parent chain, on the relay chain in that case. But first of all, exciting to hear that airdrop season is coming for our fuel holders. You just said it in a sentence, but makes a lot of sense also if you want to go for a Kusama slot or at least get a position there. But I think also it's very interesting that that whole process and the whole learnings that you have there, from building on Substrate and also becoming a Parachain. And I think also architecture wise, this is obviously super bullish for the DOT token and also the KSM token in that case, right? Because those $200 million that you said that have been raised and are now locked are hard locked for 2 years, I guess, right? And that's obviously super bullish. I think that's also one of the main reasons why both Polkadot and Kusama have a much higher market evaluation probably than something like Cosmos, right? Even though we see Terra, for example, catching up rapidly now because they also have this great architecture where you earn airdrops for just holding and staking Luna, right, on Mirror and Anchor. So I think it's also a lot about game theory, and eventually still crypto is much about how do you maximize your cash flow, and also how do you just earn rewards in the end of the day. So I think that's what most people are still here for, and I think that's also fine. We're, like we said, we're so early in this whole space. This is still very, very early days. And this time around a year ago, I think was the first time. This was like the peak of the DeFi summer, I think, or maybe it was even the end of the DeFi summer. But it was like the first DeFi summer we ever had, right? Like before DeFi was not really existing. So, really cool stuff. But yeah, so talk about because obviously raising, what is it, 9 figures to become a parachain or on Kusama or DOT is ambitious, I would say, especially if you're not connected, if you don't have Gavin's number saved on your WhatsApp, it's probably hard to get there. But so what are the other options that you have regarding, I think para threads would be one of the best options. So can you talk about how this process works, what it is, and how you could potentially position RioDeFi to still become part of the Polkadot main ecosystem here?
Yeah, sure. So the pair threads, and I think part of the reason they haven't gotten as much attention, I mean, first of all, this stuff's pretty complicated technically, and it's also something that hasn't been tested quite as much yet. So it's something that will come later in the process. They're starting with the parachain functionality first, and then the pair threads sort of secondarily. Basically, this is where, so whoever has this parachain slot, they can send their data up, to the let's say the parent chain network or this other, either Polkadot or Kusama, right? And so with the pair of threads, the idea is that, okay, let's say RioChain becomes a parachain, and then other substrate-based blockchain projects want to utilize the Polkadot network as well to store their data in a secure manner. So they can actually rent space from RioChain, send their block data up to RioChain, and send that RioChain data, up to the Polkadot network, which can then, back up not just us, but anyone connected as a parathread to our chain, to the broader Polkadot ecosystem. So it's actually for, maybe smaller projects or newer projects or whatever the case may be, it's a good way to connect to the broader ecosystem without needing to secure a full parachain slot. Because, actually in the early days, it's quite possible that many people won't have like the amount of data and the amount of transactions that will actually warrant spending so much money on one of these parachain slots, because actually, it doesn't quite make sense economically for some projects to have that full parachain slot. So you can actually just rent the space. Maybe you won't be able to send the data as quickly. So for certain types of applications and for certain types of transactions, maybe you want to wait. For example, if you're sending, instead of every few seconds, maybe you have to send it every minute or every hour, so maybe if you're doing microtransactions, that's not going to work. Now, the thing is, you can still send those transactions on your native blockchain network, and that might be fine. So, let's say someone's connected as a parathread to RioChain, and their security is pretty much good enough, right, at their own chain's level. But if you're going to send $1 million, maybe you want to wait an hour until it gets up to the Polkadot network through RioChain, to become, to clear that transaction fully or something like this. But if you're just doing small transactions and the governance on your own chain is fine, then, that's sufficient for most people. So it only becomes like an issue at, the, for the larger transactions, I would say. Of course, this totally depends on, what your business model is, what types of transactions you're doing. If it's like banking versus like, gaming, there's very different requirements there. So that's just my thoughts on it. Of course, everyone kind of has different views of the ecosystem. But, for me, the key thing about Polkadot that I like is that well, one, Rust is like a newer programming language, so it does make it a little bit harder to find excellent developers. However, it does have certain security features and speed and code efficiency that you can't find with certain other languages. Um, so I think that's one of the benefits, and also the ability to access this sort of network of other layer one blockchains, as well as parity technologies, as well as the Web3 Foundation, to have this huge community of support to be able to tackle these problems together, right? So, for example, they've built some modules regarding NFTs, so you can have NFTs on, substrate-based blockchains, and so, we've been following that, and we're in the process of incorporating that, so RioChain can also host those. So, having like this bigger group of developers that are constantly working and creating new functionalities that you can then integrate onto your layer one chain is quite valuable. So that's been really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, and I was just looking up the compatibility of Rust based SDKs like Substrate to IBC, right? So IBC is one of the most exciting trustless bridges, I think, in the whole crypto ecosystem, developed by mostly Cosmos developers, but there have also been other teams that worked on it. And it was shipped in February of this year, February 18th of 2021. So I think this could also be something that, when it goes live, you could at least create bridges over to the Cosmos ecosystem. And like you were alluding to, Terra is absolutely blowing up right now. Top 16 cryptocurrency in market cap, huge multi-billion-dollar ecosystem, lots of smart money behind as well. So this is stuff I think that, like, when you see networks or ecosystems grow like that, I think it becomes a no-brainer to try to find ways how can we connect to these networks, right? And I think Cosmos right now, they're in a phase where they actually try to build a bridge over to Ethereum in a trustless way, so that it can also leverage those ecosystems together. But maybe can you share some thoughts and your takes on Cosmos? Obviously, you're more of a Polkadot. As we can hear, you're super deep and knowledgeable on Polkadot. I think it's still a great project. I like Polkadot. I hold Dot. I'm super bullish also that this will succeed, and hopefully it will succeed, because I think the more the merrier, the better. But what are some of your thoughts on the Cosmos ecosystem and potentially implementing something like IBC or the Gravity Bridge, which is coming out in a couple of months? What would you be your take on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've definitely been following Cosmos for a long time, probably since 2017, I think. But not deep into the weeds like I have with Polkadot. But definitely a fan of what they've done, and seeing the Terra blockchain ecosystem and how it's evolved over the past year, especially. But even since the beginning, I can see that their CEO Do Kwon, he's been hugely successful in the past, and also through Terra. And Terraform Labs have incubated a number of fantastic projects. You have the Mirror protocol, the Anchor protocol, which Anchor seems to be sort of a mix between like Compound and MakerDAO, and then you have Mirror, which is a bit of like synthetics plus a DEX. Obviously synthetics itself is kind of a DEX, but and then their algorithmic stablecoin, which is quite a unique way of doing it. I think the way that they've it's not backed by Luna, you could say, but essentially it is by the burning and minting process. But it's not like in the same way as DAI, for example, which is an over collateralized stablecoin on the Ethereum network. So the goal with UST is to have more capital efficiency. So you don't have to have everything backed one to one, but rather you have this sort of a reciprocal. The better Luna does, then the better UST can do, and sort of vice versa, because UST has use cases outside of just the blockchain ecosystem, because they have their payment app. I believe it's called Chai, which processes a lot of payments annually. I think it's over 1 billion, they said. So they have quite a impressive ecosystem, and we've definitely been looking at that and looking at how we can get connected to the Cosmos ecosystem in the future. Obviously, we're first and foremost focused on building on Substrate, developing our own blockchain network, and then connecting to Polkadot and to Ethereum, because we will have EVM compatibility for RioChain quite soon. But the next step is definitely interoperable blockchain networks like Cosmos and like the Terra ecosystem as well. We want to connect to as many of these as possible. I mean, we're also looking at a cross-chain bridge eventually to Cardano, potentially to EOS and Tron and these other kind of blockchain networks at some stage. Obviously, not in this year's roadmap, but it's something that we think is quite valuable. And we don't necessarily have to be the one that builds all those bridges ourselves. We can let other people like build the bridge, and then we can connect via their bridge. That's fine too. But we are in the midst of building, as you had mentioned, decentralized bridges. So we were actually one of the first to have like a bridge between Ethereum, Bitcoin, and like a substrate-based blockchain, which is RioChain. So we have our generic asset bridge, but it uses a custodial process. So we're partnered with a company called Hex Trust here in Hong Kong. They're a licensed digital asset custodian. And so they can service this sort of cross-chain bridge in a way that's, hopefully much safer than some of the other cross-chain bridges where you've had huge hacks recently. Now, there's a bit of a trade-off, right? Because those networks were able to process things much faster because it's sort of automated. But when you have everything automated, it also is like, potentially if the smart contracts have any sort of vulnerabilities, it's a huge point of attack. And obviously that's what happened recently with Poly Network, although it seems like, the hacker is returning or has returned the funds, which is good. But, this points out some of these issues that you face when developing decentralized bridges. And I feel for those people because, it's not an easy task to do. I mean, it's very complicated and usually relies on some sort of either multi-sig or some sort of Oracle solution to read the messages between chains. So, we're actually working on decentralized bridges as well. And so I know that there's a lot of potential security, vulnerabilities that you can face there. So, we're trying to address those. And we've been studying, obviously what's happened with the sort of hack on the Poly network. And, this is an area that's developing quite quickly. But, we think the approach is we build out our own bridges that we're confident in and comfortable in, and we move in a sort of phased approach, make sure everything is safe, works properly, and then is also reviewed by a security firm. And then from there, you can kind of also connect to, once Polkadot is ready, to their Parachain bridges as well. So we think ultimately within the next year or two, as you said, this is like blockchain moving into this like phase 3 of its evolution into this interoperability. And I think with interoperability comes the scalability, actually, because if you have a bunch of different networks, and each network, even if each network could only process 1,000 transactions per second, well, 1,000 transactions times 1,000 networks, that would be 1,000,000 transactions per second. So you could get pretty much everything you need done with that kind of interoperable ecosystem. Plus, then each blockchain can subsequently evolve their own scalability over time. So I think this is definitely the way the industry is moving.
Yeah, and I want to go back to that point that basically differentiates Polkadot and Cosmos, which is the shared security model, right? So the way Polkadot started was basically to have the relay chain in Polkadot and then connect Parachain slots to it, which get access and rent security space from the relay chain, right? So which requires projects or community members to lock up funds, in that case KSM or DOT. Which is obviously very bullish for the price, which is obviously also very bullish for the kind of like hype and the whole ecosystem, because scarcity drives demand. We've seen it with Bitcoin, the limited amount of Bitcoins that are ever being created. People get excited about that because it's limited. Whenever something is limited, people want it, right? And in Cosmos, they took, even though they have the similar vision of becoming the internet of blockchains, they started at the other end of the spectrum, right? So they said, we'll not have the Cosmos Hub to be the security center and then, zones have to rent space from the hub. Rather, we want to build a technology stack, ship the Cosmos SDK, ship the IBC protocol, and then we want everybody to build their own blockchain on top of that with their own security measures, right? So Terra is one of the great examples for that, because these guys have killed it, right? And they have their own ecosystem of validators, their own security thing. But they're also right now in the process of implementing IBC. And when the Cosmos Hub ships the shared security functionality, maybe in Q4 this year, then smaller projects would also have the ability to rent space from the Cosmos Hub, but it's in a more open way, I think, because you still have the option to build your own security network. And on Polkadot, it appears to be a bit more kind of like a closed circle, but maybe that's also fine because you have to first stress test the whole system, the whole architecture, and the whole theory, right? Now the first auctions took place, and it's the first time that we actually see this thing in full swing and live, with real money and economic value backing it up. So I think it's a great approach that both take, and also that both take different approaches to achieve a very similar goal. And eventually, Polkadot could become a hub or a zone on Cosmos, and Cosmos could become a parachain on Polkadot. Why not one day? So that would be cool. But so you already briefly touched upon the fully loaded roadmap of RioDeFi. You're working on bridges, you're working on the exchange, you're working on many things. So can you talk about a little bit what are the key achievements that you want to get done for, let's say, this year, because we're already in mid-August, where you would say, man, if we get this done this year, I'm happy?
Yeah. So certainly, one of the key things that people are waiting for on our chain is to have the native version of our fuel staking on RioChain mainnet. So we're on track now to do that within the next 2 months is the plan. So it's been a lot longer than we expected. Unfortunately, we did have to work first on upgrading RioChain to Substrate version 3. So that had to take priority to get ready for the Parachain slot auctions and everything. But now things are moving pretty well for the R fuel staking. And beyond that, we're also going to have what we call DeFi pools, which are a sort of yield farming mechanism where you can stake R fuel to get actually stable coins. So this will be something that'll be nice to give extra value to R fuel holders and to be a non-dilutive form of R fuel staking, because obviously, if you stake R fuel, you get more R fuel. That's great, but it might, some people, want to sell that, right? But if you can stake R fuel and get stable coins, it's actually, something that for some people, that's something that they'd prefer because it's a way of hedging the risk. Also, some people want to have, a mixed, and I certainly recommend everyone have a mixed portfolio rather than being all in on any sort of single project. Obviously, I'm a big fan of RioChain and R fuel, but everyone should obviously diversify and definitely don't invest into any crypto project more than they're willing to lose. But yeah, so we're working on the DeFi pool, so that's something that's coming up. We're also with the sort of Rio Finance part of our ecosystem. We're in the midst of partnership with a trust company here in Hong Kong that will enable us to. So we have the partnership with Hex Trust already, but we have another trust company that's actually going to be helping to access other types of products. So this includes more of a centralized form of staking, because right now the for the crypto people, the DeFi pools are going to be great. They know how to use their own private key. And Rio Wallet does make it easier because we have an OAuth authentication that allows people to create a wallet using their Gmail or other social media accounts. But for some people still it puts the keys in their control. But if you're talking about like corporations or other people that may be uncomfortable holding large amounts of crypto, just with one private key that if they lose it, they're screwed. For these kind of people, it's important to have some sort of a backup to have like things in contractual form, to have legal protections and things like this. So we're actually working on this partnership where basically these types of corporations or just individuals as well can access staking products without having to worry about managing the private key, so that there's a secure multi-sig process in place. They can have cold storage for certain crypto holdings, etc. And so we think this will open us up to whole new sets of business as well. And I think this is important because what we're doing, ultimately is bridging traditional finance and DeFi. And there's some benefits, right, to parts of traditional finance, which, we want to bring those over. So we sort of have, I like to call it the two paths, like the right-hand path and the left-hand path. And so the right hand for me is like the pure DeFi, utopia, crypto vision. You are your own bank, you manage your own private keys. Everything's good. With great power comes great responsibility, and for those that want it, fantastic. And we will always support that with RioDeFi. I mean, that's what got me into crypto. That's what I love. On the other hand, you have the sort of left-hand path, the traditional finance path, this sort of world where your identity and your legal contracts can gain access to certain things. So it relies on a different form of trust rather than like the smart contract trust, which is maybe prone to vulnerabilities or hacking or this. You have this one which is a bit more established on the left-hand side, but of course then you have to trust some sort of intermediary, which is why you have licenses and regulations and counterparties and all this stuff. So for us, the thing that's helpful is to have both worlds, have them both running simultaneously in their own lanes, but then also creating a hybrid version. So for people, for example, some of my funds, I'm totally fine being my own bank and I totally want that and everything else. But maybe for if I want to buy real estate or I want to have just a stable coin staking in a very secure way, if I want to give cryptocurrency so that when I die, let's say I don't have any kids yet, but eventually that my kids, could have access to it. I want to put that into a trust. I want to have a will, pass that along. Maybe I don't trust or I'm not confident with the private key storage. I mean, you can do it with a private key in a bank account, but there's other issues with that. So, maybe you want something that's secured by legal contracts and this kind of thing. So we want to help bridge those two worlds together because there's definitely benefits to each world. And so that's something we've been focused on. And yeah, it takes a lot of time because, working with regulators and especially during COVID, you can actually travel and you can't meet the bankers face to face, you can't meet the regulators face to face. So that's given some unforeseen challenges. But we do think this is where the space is going. And I think you can see that in what's happened to Binance. I love Binance. I mean, a huge fan of it. And it's been probably, my favorite exchange for quite a while. In terms of the functionalities that they provide to traders and things like this, but actually they've been dinged by a lot of regulators recently, and so this is creating problems with like the fiat on and off ramps and things like this. So there's you kind of have to take the kind of do each one in its own way. The centralized path has a very certain way of going about it. You have to be very methodical, very careful, very conservative in some ways, and the DeFi path kind of run fast, break things, innovate, whatever. But there's also negatives to that, like the hacks and the vulnerability. So you kind of got to take each for what it's worth, and then that's why we kind of create this hybrid approach as well, so that people can benefit from both sides. Have your fun crypto side over here and your more traditional side over here.
100% agree. And I think I talked about this a lot with my friends from DeFi Times. I think you've also been on their podcast a couple of months ago. That the kind of like this term institutional DeFi is boiling up, and we see now Aave, they launched Aave Pro, which is tailored for institutions to get easy access to DeFi protocols, but still kind of like maintain control to some degree and have some centralized point there, which, like you said, like those guys don't want to like have one private key and give it to the intern, and if he loses it, they're screwed. That's funny, but yeah, I think it's a hybrid, and also the traditional kind of like financial sector is not going to be replaced by food coin yield farms and those kind of things. I'm sure maybe we have a few million users eventually in the DeFi space, pure DeFi space, but also I know a lot of people personally that don't even want to deal with that. They don't want to write down 12 words on a piece of paper. They don't want to deal with that. Yesterday I was in the airport, and the lady saw the security said I have a ring light, and she's like, "Oh my God, one of these YouTubers." I'm like, "Yeah, I do crypto." And she's like, "Oh my God, this is too risky, too dangerous for me, and this and that." Like most people don't want to even learn about this. They're used to give away responsibility, accountability, and give away control over their especially finances and money to somebody else, right? We're used to this with banks, and I think in the same time, in the same format, we will have crypto banks or crypto custodians or crypto middlemen that might build reputation that you can trust, but also a lot of them will screw it up, right? But at the same time, like you're saying, you have a lot of projects that rush code, don't take security auditing serious, and then they get hacked a couple of times, right? So we see this over and over again. But anyways, this is a very cool conversation. I think we put a lot of value for this out of this. Maybe lastly, before we leave, you can share one or two things about the exchange that you're building that's coming out. That's something that I'm personally very excited about, because I think it's a great product that has a strong product market fit. So maybe you can share some thoughts about that, and then also after that, if you want, some other things that you're mostly excited about in RioDeFi world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is another thing that certainly I'd like to launch before the end of the year. So following up on that question, getting the exchange operational. We have applied for the Payment Services Act license in Singapore, so we're in the process of going through that with the Singapore Monetary Authority of Singapore, the MAS. We also have a cryptocurrency exchange license in Estonia, and we're in the process of actually applying for licenses in other jurisdictions. So, we do intend to have a regulated exchange that can transact with fiat currencies, because we think this will be important for many people as we move forward. Obviously, people like in the US, there's many options and you can connect crypto exchanges to your bank accounts and whatnot. But for many other parts of the world, actually, there's not good, well-known, regulated exchanges that you can feel comfortable with and safe with when transacting large amounts. And I think this is hugely important for the next stage of evolution of the crypto space, is to have these, whether we like it or not, regulators at their best are they're trying to prevent fraud and abuse. They're trying to protect the consumer. Sometimes they overstep their boundaries, and sometimes they are too restrictive on innovative markets. I would definitely say that's the case. But ultimately they're trying to keep people safe, at least in the way that they know how. So, I think it's important to, especially if you're going to have any time where you're touching fiat currencies, so you have to play by this sort of game, right? You have to follow this approach. And so, we're with Rio Exchange working toward that. And it will use our fuel. So you'll be able to use our fuel for transaction fees, to get discounts on transaction fees as well, just by, staking it into the platform. And so this will create a whole new set of uses for our fuel. Of course, our fuel will be able to be traded on the exchange as well. And we're also in the midst of incubating a DEX project on RioChain as well. So, we think that, having both options is something that's very valuable for people, because, if you want to have access to fiat currencies and bank accounts, okay, you go the centralized exchange route. But if you're happy just to swap between various cryptocurrencies and stable coins, you can use a DEX. And, also it depends on people's level of, safety and what they're comfortable with. So again, as we said, some people are very happy to just give the responsibility over to, the custodian or the bank or whatever the case may be, to manage those funds securely, because they know that company, is taking on the risk. And, there's oftentimes insurance, Coinbase, for example, is insured on their assets. And then they have very strong cold storage as well. So, we're working with industry leaders like, again, Hex Trust, who can provide cold storage custody for the cryptocurrencies that'll be on the Rio Exchange platform. So, we think it's important that you keep a minimal amount, obviously, in the hot wallets and things, because obviously we've seen many, many exchange hacks over the years. So, we're excited to provide a more secure, safe platform for people to trade on. And yeah, we definitely think that, it'll give value to people.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all these insights. And I'll link also all the channels under this video for Telegram and Twitter, so that people can follow up. And also the website, I think, is really cool to keep track. Play around with the wallet, and get involved in the community. I think you guys are building cool things and also have a great ideology that resonates a lot with mine. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about RioDeFi, and also the whole kind of like interoperability space itself. Thanks so much for taking the time to come on. And yeah, we'll keep track of everything and have you on in a couple of months probably.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Take care.